are you, man? Good to see you. I know. How you doing, man? You all right? They're keeping you. It's worth it. It's worth it. Yeah. That's good. Especially this one, man. Alhamdulillah. How are you? How's your family? Good. Alhamdulillah. Oh, you did?
Yeah, he's also from home.
Okay, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum. Oh, man. What's up, man? You good? You good? Look at you had to get up. You had to do the cat technique, man. How you been, man? Good to see you, man. Good to see you, man. How's your family, man? How's your brother? Mom's good? Everyone's good? Yes, grab my tea.
والله ما في عندي واحدة بالقرار بس مش عارف دورت عليها مش موجودة. لا بس كلمة في الدار. العيد تستمر العيد. الأردن كثير حمراء. وحتى من جماعة الجزيرة. نعم. الشرق القسم بالسعودية بس مش كثير كلهم أبيض بعضهم أبيض بس في قسم أبيض سادة بس مخطط لا. You know where we say no salam when you're eating, or no, no shake in the hand when you're eating.
It's pretty sure, right?
I'll keep your hands off my son.
Nothing.
كيف حالك عزيزي؟ ليش تحب القرآن؟ تساعدك إيه؟ خلي صوتك حبيبي.
When we knocked on the walls, it's pretty weird.
What's your name, brother?
Brother, John.
John, Mark. Very nice to meet you. What was your name? Mario. Mark. Very nice to meet you.
واحد بس خلي اثنين.
Looks like the lights.
Oh yeah, it does.
All right. إن شاء الله لنبدأ. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والعاقبات للصالحين وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد سيد المرسلين تاج البني هاشم النبي العربي محمد ابن عبد الله صلوات الله تعالى عليه وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن تبعهم بفضل وإحسان إلى يوم الدين. أما بعد. Alhamdulillah, we have gathered here to just allow really a platform for us to voice some of our feelings and our thoughts about what is going on in the region known as Gaza. I'm going to just share a few remarks from the Book of Allah and maybe a few from the statements of the Prophet ﷺ and from some of the Salihin that have had some meritorious things to say about that part of the world. And then what I had really hoped that this would be was an opportunity actually from those amongst us that were either born in Philistine or are by extraction from there, to give them an opportunity if there's anything that they wish to say, and for us to, just express if we have any thoughts or strategies of how to go forward to deal with the situation. So inshallah, that's what I had planned and laid out. And so I thought that I would begin with a verse of the Quran, وَفِيهَا دُعَاء, in which it contains a supplication. And I would read this to kind of set the mood, because people ask me all the time, Imam, what can we do? What should we do? As if I have, the answers for people. Sometimes think, that's why tonight, my wife asked me, do you want to wear your jalaba? You want to? No, I'm going to wear a hoodie, because tonight I'm coming before you. Yes, I'm Imam, but I'm also just ana kama qala Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, ana basharun mithlukum. I'm a man just like the rest of you. And so honestly, in this situation, I have felt probably all of the same emotions that all of you have, from anger, rage, bewilderment, sadness, powerlessness, all of those things. And so I thought I would start with a verse from the Quran that again has a dua to encourage us that no matter what the situation is, that we call upon Allah Ta'ala and we continue to call upon Him, both for the fath, inshallah, for the victory for our brothers and sisters in Palestine, but really for lil mustad'ifina wa madlumina fil ard, for anyone that is oppressed anywhere in the world. We ask and call upon Allah, and of course we call upon Him for ourselves, لنجائنا للآخرة, of course, for our own salvation in the hereafter. So Allah Ta'ala says, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu. As I had mentioned in the khutbah today, when you hear this address, when you hear or read a verse in the Quran that says, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, O you who believe. We are all Muslims, inshallah, and so the very point of us reading the Quran is that nu'minu bih, we believe in it. So inshallah, bi'idhnihi nahnu mu'minun. By His permission, inshallah, we are all believers. And so when Allah addresses us, when He addresses the believers, I said your antenna should go up. Istajibu lillahi wa li rasulihi. Right? Respond, call upon Allah Ta'ala, respond to Him and to His Messenger. Right? إِذْ دَعَاكُمْ لِمَا يُحْيِيكُمْ, because they are calling to you that which will give you life. So we call upon Allah Ta'ala, and one of the mufassirin, قال واحد من المفسرين, he said, المهم في هذه الآية, right? The important thing in this particular verse, أولا هي دعاء. One, it's a dua. ثانيا, secondly, he said, ما ندعو لله هو خير مما أتانا. That whatever it is that we call upon Allah for, the fact that we call upon Allah, this is more significant. He said, ahim, it is more significant than whatever it is if Allah Ta'ala answers in this life our dua and gives us something, that is second to the fact that we are calling upon Him, because lil abd, inshallah, lil abd munib, right, for the one that is penitent, that turns frequently to Allah and calls upon Him. This demonstrates huwa aw hiya fi qulubihim, he or she, right, in their hearts. Hum ya'rifuna man rabbahum, they know who their Lord is. And so one calling upon Allah, making dua to Him is, of course, huwa ibadah. right? It's an act of worship. And so he said, what? Call and respond to Allah and to the messenger, that he said, إِذَا دَعَاكُمْ, when he calls you to whatever it is going to what? لِمَا يُحْيِيكُمْ, of what will bring you back to life. So also he said that this هذا الإحياء هو الدعاء في نفسه, that he said that making dua with a, بقلب منيب والسليم, right, with a sound and good heart and in genuine need of Allah, is that to do so, it demonstrates that that person knows who their Lord is, that they know who their Lord is. وَاعْلَمُوا أَنَّ اللَّهَ يَحُولُ بَيْنَ الْمَرْءِ وَقَلْبِهِ. Know that Allah Ta'ala is able to intercede between a person, right, in their heart. وَأَنَّهُ إِلَيْهِ تُحْشَرُونَ. And on one day, all of you, you'll all be gathered together. So I wanted to open up with this just to remind us of the importance. Keep calling upon Allah, keep begging Him, one, for the islah, inshallah, of for the rectification of your own deeds and for the forgiveness of your own shortcomings. But also, obviously, yes, continue to knock on the door and to beg Allah Ta'ala to have mercy upon our brothers and sisters suffering in Palestine and anywhere else. Ameen. So, what is this place that is called Philistine and also Gaza? Some of you may have heard of a place called Asqalan. Asqalan, in fact, there is a famous fi muhaddith sharif mashhur. There's a very, very noble and famous scholar, Ibn al-Hajar al-Asqalani. So sometimes it's not common today, but you may find people that they will have في نسبتهم في نسبهم, in their like family name, al-Asqalani. This is the nisba of Asqalan. Asqalan is also the name of the place in the area in which, Gaza and Palestine. And I mentioned this because, of course, now we hear all of this nonsense coming from the kuffar and their supporters that these people are not really from the area. So if you go back to, for instance, Ibn Hajar, rahimahullah, right, this is one of the most famous muhaddith of our tradition. We're going back hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years ago, that even though he was raised in Egypt, his family lineage goes back to Asqalan. So there's no doubt, in fact, that the Palestinians indeed are the indigenous people from this part of the world. Also, of course, this area is important to us, not specifically in Gaza, but in Palestine, right, of Al-Quds, right, or of Jerusalem, and Bayt al-Maqdis, right, the house, the Masjid al-Aqsa, right, of course, is an extremely important place to us. And it's been related, for instance, عن أبي ذر رضي الله عنه. And there's a lot of, and I'm mentioning this too because it's important, even though we're all here, alhamdulillah, inshallah, to support Palestine and Gaza. Sometimes the things that people say about places, sometimes they kind of become embellished, like beyond, reason. And so you'll have some people that will say that, صلاة واحدة في القدس أفضل من, like ألف صلوات في أي مكان. Like, one prayer in Jerusalem and Masjid al-Aqsa is better than, thousands of prayers done in anywhere else. And to some degree, there are some reports that do verify that it is a blessed place to pray, and the prayers that are done so indeed are amplified. But there is a lot of ikhtilaf, a lot of difference of opinion about these ahadith and athar, about these reports from the Prophet ﷺ, and some things that were mentioned by the companions. And many of them, the marfu'a or mursal, or meaning that they're not 100% sound. So for instance, an Abi Dhar radiallahu anhu, one of the great companions, Abu Dhar, he says, صلاة في مسجد الأقصى هذا أفضل من 4 صلوات في بيت المقدس. And so he said, well, prayers in my home were actually better than there. And then others, they said, no, actually, that if you, وَمِنْهَا مَنْ يَجْعَلُ الصَّلَاةَ فِيهَا تُعَدِّلُ أَلْفَ صَلَاةٍ في غيره وهو حديث ميمونة. So for instance, Maymuna bint Sa'd relates a hadith for us, or really athar, and it's actually not clear. Some say it's just a report from her. Others say that she's saying that the Prophet ﷺ said this, that prayers done there could be worth 1,000 times being more meritorious or more rewarded, right, than in some other places. So it's true. There are some reports. It's clearly a very blessed place. Also, this is obviously when the Prophet ﷺ went on Mi'raj, right, that he went and he landed and he prayed there, and then before his ascent into the heavens. So al-Isra wal Mi'raj, right? Obviously, for these reasons, it is an extremely important place for us. So just keep some of those things in mind. Sometimes people, they like to embellish a little bit much. Likewise, Allah Ta'ala has said, لِلَّذِينَ اسْتَجَابُوا لِرَبِّهِمُ الْحُسْنَى. Those that call upon their Lord will receive goodness. So again, just encouraging us to call upon Allah Ta'ala and to seek out His help. As it relates to, now I'm just going to give some of my own anecdotal kind of experience. And I do believe that the Muslim community, we have arrived at a moment. This is different. Some people say, oh, they've been fighting, even some ridiculous people in my family. Oh, well, they've been fighting over there for thousands of years. That's a stupid statement, right? One, they haven't been fighting over there for thousands of years. Two, they actually had an extended period of tranquility, particularly when the Ottoman Empire was there. And for the most part, people were able to get along actually fairly well. And that include Jews, Christians, and Muslims. And so this idea that, oh, nobody, if you have three different religions, they all can't play nice in the sandbox. No, this is absolutely a false statement. Also, the idea that somehow that when the Jews that were there were expelled, and this is also another thing that we hear that is also factually quite untrue. Many of the Zionists will say that, oh, there was all these expulsion of Jews from the Muslim world. But when Zionism began to gain ground as kind of an idea towards the turn of the 20th century, around the late 1800s going into the early 1900s, it was actually these Zionist Jews living in Europe and their Christian Zionist supporters that went to Jews living in different parts of the Muslim world and convinced them that, oh man, these Muslims are going to turn on you and they're going to slaughter you. So you got to leave and you have to go to this, you have to go to Palestine. You have to go to this, we're going to make this new state called Israel. And so, for instance, like my ex-wife, who was from Algeria, told me that, she grew up, she knew Jews that lived in Algeria. And I remember talking with her older brother, Abdurrahman, who was born probably around like 1960 or maybe late 50s. And he talked about, like, in Algeria, it wasn't the Algerians that expelled the Jews from Algeria, but rather they left of their own accord. And similar things of friends of mine from Morocco, the Jews lived in Morocco for a very long time and were actually quite prosperous. If you actually compare to some of the average Moroccans, which were quite poor, many of the Jews that lived in Morocco were merchants involved in textiles and other things. And they actually lived like a fairly prosperous life and they didn't have any issues. And there's a great documentary, if you can find it on YouTube. It's all in Arabic, but it's a really wonderful documentary about a Moroccan Jewish woman that begins with her. She went back to Morocco. She left as a child, went to Israel, hated the experience of being Jewish in Israel. And when her daughter was old enough, they went back and did their version of a walima. When her daughter got married, they went back to Morocco and she did the wedding there because she said, ultimately, I still feel like Morocco is my home. My family lived in Morocco for hundreds of years. We were very successful. And actually, we fell on hard times when we went to Israel, because when they left to go in 48, she's like, there was nothing there. There was nothing there for us. So just to kind of summarize, in case anybody is still harboring under, any doubts or drowning in this, sea of disinformation, that this notion that they were all forcibly expelled simply just doesn't hold up, to historical inquiry. So as to what we can do, I really think that Muslims need to re-examine our participation in interfaith, because all of this interfaith that we've been doing, of supposedly getting together with so-called like-minded people, even the very idea of interfaith, personally, I think is actually, from an aqidah point of view, is actually quite problematic. But we should be able to ask ourselves honestly, or pose a question: what do we gain from this? Why is it that we have had to work so hard to get support? And especially, we need to hold Muslim organizations responsible that want to bring these politicians to come after Jumu'ah, or to bring them in Ramadan, that I've seen in years past, and have them speak to the congregation because they're from this democratic, party or whatnot. And then only to turn around, and those very same people that we allowed to come into our masajid and preach to our congregation, when it came to the question of ceasefire, when it came to the question of Israel, they were unwaveringly in support of them. And so we have to ask ourselves, how do we reconcile this kind of political backhanded slap? What are we gaining from this? We need to grow a spine. We need to have some teeth. We need to have a much more muscular kind of political engagement with these people, and not pull any punches about what it is we stand for, what our demands are, in the same way that they are. These people are telling us that, we unequivocally will support Israel. Well, as any politician, there's no such thing as unconditional. Just like there's no such thing as unconditional love. Right? People have this idea that, animals will give you unconditional love. Trust me, if you beat an animal, it will not unconditionally love you. Politicians unconditionally love those that give them money. And so we also need to double down and be more active and concentrated in how we protest. It's wonderful to go out and march and whatnot, but as we saw, we actually had a direct effect on some of the biggest corporations that were perhaps symbolic but important, like one of them being Starbucks. When we decided to boycott Starbucks, within 2 months, Starbucks was forced to start making ads saying, "Hey, look, if you come, we'll give you 50% off of this and 50% off of that." And they were taking a massive hit, especially as their market in the West has become saturated. I mean, pretty much they can't really build any more Starbucks here. I think the market is pretty saturated. But overseas, and what they kind of call the political South, right? Overseas, and which includes many, many Muslim countries, these were just kind of emerging markets for them, and they were extremely important for their bottom line. And they have learned a hard lesson in countries like Malaysia and in countries overseas, where they saw their business basically come to a grinding halt. And so this is important. The reason why I mentioned this is that there are many places in the Quran where Allah talks about jihad. And yes, we need to get comfortable with saying that word out loud, because it means what we know what it means. It means what Allah says it means. It means what the Prophet ﷺ said it means. It does not mean what Fox News said it means. So we need to get comfortable with being able to discuss our religion in its entirety. And in the verses in the Quran where Allah Ta'ala discusses jihad, He says, وَتُجَاهِدُونَ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ بِأَمْوَالِهُمْ وَأَنفُسِهُمْ. The ordering is always what? And they struggle in the way of Allah with their money, with their wealth, and then if it really comes to it, yes, with their bodies. And even then, there's many different ways you can physically struggle, right? Getting together, organizing and such. But there's a reason why Allah Ta'ala in the Quran, when He talks about jihad, He puts money first. Because one, Islam as a system, right? Islam huwa din wa ka nazam, right? As a system, it wants to avoid unnecessary fighting and bloodshed. So if you can have a conflict, and here's the nature: Islam is a religion that deals with reality. And one part of reality is humans have conflict. We will always have conflict. Even between the Muslims, sometimes we have conflict. Between the Muslim and the non-Muslim, conflict. Between the non-Muslim and the non-Muslim, conflict. It's just part of the human nature to have conflict. So the Quran deals with it, but it has ways of preference of dealing with it. And so if you have to struggle first economically. You might be able to win the battle. You might be able to win the conflict. You might be able to get what you want purely through, because what? It's going to, most people, they prize money before even themselves. وَلَنَبْلُوَنَّكُمْ, right? مِنَ الْجَوِّ what? وَنَقْصٌ مِنَ الْأَمْوَالِ وَالْأَنفُسِ. And Allah says, without a doubt, we promise that we are going to test you with hunger. And what? نَقْصٌ مِنَ الْأَمْوَالِ. And what? Loss of money. And then وَالْأَنفُسِ. Then loss of life. So the human psychology, right? We love money. We love money. We're dearly attached to it. Sometimes we love it more than life itself. And so when we analyze the Quran from this, point of view and really reflect upon it, I think we have only begun to scratch the surface of what the potential is of doing jihad and doing it in a way that first is economic, doing it in a way that, yes, if you're going to, and we have to be unequivocal, we have no problem with you making a profit. Islam has always been the religion of people that were, matraj, of tijara, of people that were business. In fact, this is one of the wahad min al-turaq, right? One of the ways that Islam spread was through business, right? Much more than it was through any kind of physical or kinetic conflict. And so if we analyze and think we've only begun to scratch the surface. And Allah has given us a fath, He's given us a victory in this to see, look, if you hit them in their pocketbook, this will have an effect. And that's why actually Israel has scrambled to try to pass legislation through their control of the of American lawmakers to try to make it haram, basically, right? To make it illegal to boycott officially Israel. Why? Because it's about the money. And so there's like a kind of, just like we have a prison to pipeline thing in America, there's kind of like also a pipeline to Israel in terms of, think about it, how many people are becoming overnight millionaires and billionaires because of the stock that they have in Raytheon, that they have in Boeing, that they have in these arms companies. My wife has been applying for jobs. She said it's so hard because right now, like, she's getting ready to finish her MBA at UCLA, right? A very prestigious business school. She's like, man, but all of the like really nice, high-paying jobs, they're like one way or another, they're like more than how they're all connected to like this arms, pipeline and thing. So of course, people, there's money. But if we say, look, you know what, Pete Aguilar or whatever the other one was, you can count on us, never voting for you, never giving you a cent. And we're a large enough constituency now also because the world, forget about mainstream media, the world has largely slid in favor of the Palestinians. And so if we are able to convince more and more people, this is what's terrifying them now about the election. More and more Americans, especially this Gen, I don't know, man, they got too many. I can't keep track of the letters. There's Gen Z, Gen Alpha, LGBTQ, ABCD. I can't keep track of all the huruf. I say the ashab al-huruf, right? They're just the people of the letters. But these people today, the younger generation, are like, you know what? I'm not even going to vote. And this terrifies them because they are in need of us. We are not really in need of them, but they are very much in need of us. So when Allah Ta'ala says, وَتُجَاهِدُونَ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ بِأَمْوَالِكُمْ وَأَنفُسِكُمْ, fight and struggle in the way of Allah first with your money. I think, again, we have only begun to scratch the surface of this. And so we need to indeed come together and strategize, but at the same time, not settle for what merely is punitive. Yes, of course, you want to support Israel, or you want to support killing. To be honest, even what's going on like in the Congo right now, we all live in this super technological world. Like I have an iPhone, right? All these rare earth minerals and these things that are like children are dying digging out minerals out of the ground in the Congo, right? Just so I can have a new iPhone 15, or we can have a fancy battery in our new Tesla car. And these same people like Elon Musk want to moralize to us. At the same time, you have an entire empire that is built upon immoral labor and immoral resources and action. And so it's one thing to say, okay, and I posed it. I know this would probably really, upset a number of Muslims, but I said, okay, everybody, the low hanging fruit is we're not going to buy from Starbucks anymore. Okay, great. Their coffee is horrible anyway. How many Muslims would be willing to sell their Tesla? How many Muslims would be willing, those that have already bought a Tesla, how many Muslims would be willing to say, you know what, Elon Musk, you can have it back? All right, it's a little bit, that's a little bit more higher stakes. We're not going to buy a Tesla. We're not going to support you because, one, as we said, your practice is also steeped in immoral labor, but you want to go over, you want to visit Netanyahu, you want to visit somebody that has murdered thousands of children with impunity. You can have your Tesla. You can have your little funny, please go to Mars and don't come back. But beyond the punitive measures, we need to think creatively, because if we really are going to fulfill the command of وَتُجَاهِدُونَ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ بِأَمْوَالِكُمْ, right? Strive and fight in the way of Allah with your money first, then we have to find a way that goes beyond the punitive that also rewards. So great, you know what? You have a great product and you stand for the Palestinians. You stand for the Congolese. You stand for labor that is not supporting, child. Great. You know what? We'll take the whole lot off of you. You will be the company that 2 billion people on the face of the earth will gladly, exclusively transact. Who on this planet Earth would not want to have an exclusive contract of doing business with some 2 billion people on the face of the earth? We have enormous buying power. And so again, just putting these ideas out there for us to kind of kick around, I think that it's important to have punitive measures of penalizing those that do those things that are immoral. But I think we need to also think even higher, than that, and think about working cooperatively of rewarding those that want to have systems that are built on adala, that are built on justice, right? So there's so many great opportunities that can come out of this. I think that can, inshallah, benefit us. The other thing I want to mention, and I'm just being honest here because these things have been put to me and voiced to me, is that there are some folks that have been to say, well, yeah, it's one thing to support Palestine, but, I know some Palestinians that are racist. So I don't want to support them until they support Black people. I'm just being honest. I'm going to sit up here as a Black person. I'm going to tell you this is how the thinking of some people have been. And to this, I would say, do we hold hostage people for the malfeasance of some over what the Messenger ﷺ has said and what the Quran has said? So Allah Ta'ala said, وَاعْتَصِمُوا بِحَبْلِ اللَّهِ جَمِيعًا وَلَا تَفَرَّقُوا. Right? Allah Ta'ala has said, what? All of you who believe, all of you come together, grab the rope of Allah and don't break up into groups. Don't divide. Yes, that will include those that have the marad of unsuriya fi qulubihim. That will include those that do have the problem, the sickness of racism in their heart. Am I denying that there are some Palestinians that might be racist? This is stupid. We can go to any group and we can find any group of people that are not perfect. But we have to stop sabotaging the group because the group is who amongst us doesn't have some sins, both individually and collectively? If this is how we're thinking, and our enemies, and we have to get this in our mind, there are enemies of the Muslims. This thing with Palestine is even bigger than Palestine. Look, Netanyahu is drooling to start a regional war to attack Iran. And let's be honest, this is about Islam. This is unequivocally about Islam. This is an attack on Islam. Let's get that right in our heads, and let's not try to mince any words about it. That's what it is. So our enemies, I mean, you got Jews, particularly Zionist Jews, that don't even believe in God, that are mulhidun, that are atheists, working with super religious Jews in Israel that are also Zionist. One believes in God, one doesn't, but they're willing to put aside their differences when it comes to that and work on the objective of let's annihilate the Palestinians, and when we'll get through with them, we're going to go after the whole entire region, Lebanon, Iran, and who knows, maybe after that, we'll just go after all the Muslims. Yes, are there some Palestinians? Of course. But at the same time, one of my best friends, who's black, is married to a Palestinian woman, and his wife, her sister, is married to a brother from Kenya. And I have some other friends of mine back home in Detroit that are Palestinian, that have married people outside of their Palestinian background. So are we going to hold hostage and have a temper tantrum because some people aren't perfect? And two, let's weigh the scales. The mass murdering of Muslim children, of people, and some people's bad character. Let's weigh these on a scale. So whoever's holding these ideas needs to seriously grow up, needs a slap in the face, and needs to wake up out of this fantasy world that they're living in. And we have to what? Al-Muslim akhu Muslim. What is upon you is to be, when the Prophet ﷺ said, the Muslim is a brother or sister of another Muslim, it is not laysat jumla shartiyya. This is not a conditional sentence. Well, I'll be his brother as long as he's good to. No. If that person is a Palestinian and I'm African American and they have an issue with black people, well, you know what? That's something they will face on the day of judgment. And of course, I'll make dua. May Allah Ta'ala guide that person to what is better and to what is right. But for me, inshallah, ana min muttabi' Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I'm trying to be from the followers of Muhammad sallallahu ta'ala alaihi wasallam. I'm trying to be a follower of the Prophet. If I follow the Prophet only based upon other people's perfect, flawless execution of following him, then I'm going to be a very poor follower of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And so this idea I wanted to also address, and it needs to be thrown in the dustbin. We need to get rid of this idea. And so lastly, before I open or turn the floor over to anybody that wants to say something, there was something that one of the scholars, I'll translate, that he wrote, in which he said, Yajibu alayna, right? It's an obligation for us. And nasta'shira bi mubadi al-ukhuwati bayn al-muslimin. It's our obligation as Muslims to establish brotherhood and sisterhood on those principles of brotherhood and sisterhood between the Muslims, between the believers. إنما المؤمنون إخوة. And of course, he quotes then the verse from the Quran that the believers are brothers and sisters of one another. فالأخوة بين المؤمنين ليست محصورة في مكان أو زمان. This is important. He said that, and as it relates to the establishment of real, true brotherhood and sisterhood between the believers, that it is not something solely reserved for or limited to. ليست محصورة, and it's not limited only to what مكان أو زمان, to a particular place or even a particular time. I remember not long after I had began my studies, and we were reading of the fiqh Maliki, right? We were reading in the particular tradition of Islamic jurisprudence from the Maliki madhab. And when you go and read some of the opinions of the early scholars, sometimes you would find that they would say things about certain groups of people that we today might find offensive. Whether that was their opinions about black people or even about the Ajam, right? Particularly had Arab scholars, when they would write sometimes about the non-Arabs, like it was written in a way that, let's just say, it wasn't entirely, flattering. And then as a response, you had some great scholars like Jahid, rahimahullah, that he actually wrote a book about the fada'il of Bilad al-Sudan, right? The beautiful merits or qualities of black people, right? If we get locked into this, again, this is going to be a catastrophe for us. So he said, we have to establish brotherhood and sisterhood between ourselves that's not limited to a place or a time, because we will always find some problem no matter where we look. Because one, this is ad-dunya, yani dar al-ibtila'at. This is the life, this is the world of trials and tribulations. Dar al-fitan. إنما المؤمنون إخوة في الشتاء بقاء الأرض. Right, and so he said that, for instance, the ikhuwa, the brother and sisterhood between the Muslims, it should spread to all corners of the earth, right? ويترتبوا على ذلك أن يكون ولاؤك على المؤمنين فلا تعين كافرا عليهم, and that out of that we have an obligation to make a wilayah to support one another, as well as an obligation not to aid the kafir into overcoming or overwhelming any of our other brothers and sisters. And so as it relates to the issue of Palestine, or our brothers and sisters in Hind, our brothers and sisters in Yemen, in many different places in the world, we should not be playing favorites. But my hope, and I'll end with this, my hope is that due to the catastrophic nature of what has happened, and yes, I'm sure if you tally up some numbers, some bean counter, the death toll in Palestine compared to some other conflicts, of course, there are some other conflicts where there's much greater loss of life. But whether we like it or not, the reason why this is having such a profound effect on all of us is for a couple of things. One, there's no doubt that there is some fada'il and the Ahl al-Filistin. There is a particular merit or quality to the people of Palestine based upon statements of the Prophet ﷺ about the people of Sham, and of which, of course, Palestine is a part of that. But two, this is unprecedented. There may have indeed been conflicts before this or even concurrent to it, of which the numbers of casualties are higher, but we have never been exposed to it viscerally and visually in real time. And so we cannot discount. And so from this, it has indeed moved the hearts of the world. I mean, you have people you have huge throngs of people in Ireland, Europeans, right? Huge throngs of people in Ireland marching, demanding a ceasefire. Barcelona, Madrid, many different places, even throughout Europe, even places that historically didn't necessarily always have the best relationship with Muslims, but because we have all been exposed to it in a visual way that is unprecedented, it has had this effect. And it's my hope that this can be a sea change, as we say in English, that this will be kind of a high water mark of which we will say, indeed, never again for anybody. I don't care whether it's Palestinian, Congolese, Haitian, like enough. We all live in an increasingly shrinking world, and in growing population, shrinking resources. They said every single astronaut that has ever gone into space, and I apologize if there's any flat earthers here, but I'm just, so astronauts went into space and they saw the round earth. And they said every single one had a moment when they're in space looking at the earth, thinking, how ridiculous is it for us to be fighting over imaginary lines? Okay, sure. في شعوب وجعلناكم شعوبا وقبائل لتعارفوا. Allah Ta'ala says, yeah, we have made you into different tribes and different peoples لتعارفوا مش لتخالفوا, right? For the purpose of to know one another, not to differ with one another, to know one another. So that each one of them, they had this feeling like, man, this world is so beautiful, has been created, as we recited in Surah Qaf, right? أفلم ينظروا إلى السماء فوقهم كيف بنيناها وزيناها وما لها من فروج. Don't they look at the heavens and ponder how it was created, how it was raised above them, and how it was fashioned and shaped and beautified, and it has no faults or cracks in it. They all had this feeling upon returning to Earth, even though they were not Muslim. He was talking about all these non-Muslim astronauts. When they went there and came back, they had this overwhelming sense of, I need to do something to bring people together to solve, because these problems, these problems are ridiculous. We're fighting and squabbling over dirt. And so I think now we have a moment of, despite the mainstream media, of near universal support for them, and that we could turn this into a new global movement of de-escalation of violence, and to change the way how we live as humans based upon Islamic morals, even for those that are not Muslim. Even for those that are not Muslim. As Allah said, كُنْتُمْ خَيْرَ أُمَّةٍ أُخْرِجَتْ لِلنَّاسِ. You are the best community of other humans that were brought out. Though you are Muslim and they are not. تَأْمُرُونَ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ. If you look at the order, again, there's a thing called in tafsir at-tartib, tartib al-kalimat, right? The ordering of words. When Allah mentions things in a sentence or in a verse, the order in which He mentions those things is of great importance. So Allah says, you are the best community brought out for all of mankind, meaning you, ya ayyuhal muslimun, oh you Muslims, lil alameen, for all of the people, right? Which includes al-kuffar. It includes the non-Muslims. Ta'muruna bil ma'ruf. Why doesn't He say tu'minuna billah? What doesn't He say you're the best community brought out for all of humanity? Command the people to believe in Islam and to believe in Allah. The very first thing is ta'muruna bil ma'ruf. Command them to good. And the word that Allah to use is what? Ma'ruf. I have an idea what's good as a Muslim, right? Eating halal food, not eating pork, not drinking, not committing zina, not gambling, right? Some of the harumat are specific to Islam. But there are other types of things that we command to do good, even say if a person, they drink. But there's still enough good out there to command the people to. And it doesn't mean we still shouldn't encourage them. And now you have, these interesting new scientific, studies of which, well, actually no amount of alcohol is good for you. And people are starting to reconsider. I think it was actually, I think it was a non-Muslim who came with some idea of a dry bar. And there's a comedy club, like a dry comedy club. Like non-Muslims are coming up with this idea. Maybe now that they've all drowned themselves during COVID and stayed home, they're starting to realize that living a life of constant drinking alcohol really isn't good for the body. So we call people to good. وَتَنْهَوْنَ عَنِ الْمُنْكَرِ. And we also call people to leave away that which is evil. Now, what I might consider eating pork to be evil, you might not, but there's enough common ground, right? Murdering children, whether you're an atheist, a Jew, a Buddhist, a Muslim, I think we can all agree that's pretty horrible. تَأْمُرُونَ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ وَتَنْهَوْنَ عَنِ الْمُنْكَرِ. And then ثَالِثًا وَتُؤْمِنُونَ بِاللَّهِ. And then even to that, وَلَوْ آمَنَ أَهْلَ الْكِتَابِ لَكَانَ خَيْرًا لَهُمْ. If only the people of the book would believe, that would be better for them. Meaning that Allah is even acknowledging they might believe and they might not believe. But whether they do or don't, that has nothing to do with your mahmum, with your mission. Our mission is al-amr bil-ma'ruf wal-nahy al-munkar wal-iman billah. In that order. if we obsess about people believing, well, number one, ala al-hadi wa nahnu ibad al-hadi. Allah is the one that guides, and we merely worship Him. So it's also being a little bit more, humble about our own capabilities. We cannot force. لا إكراه في الدين قد تبين الرشد من الغي. Right? What is clear and what is right and good is clear, and that's an affair between Allah and His creation. So I think if we focus on calling people to good, prohibiting evil, generally calling people to to belief in Allah, getting back to making an earnest da'wah, calling people to Islam. Inshallah, nujahidu fi sabilillah, struggling in the way of Allah, awwalan bi amwalina, with our really struggling in the way of Allah, really tapping into that economic part first. Because trust me, in this day and age, one of my teachers said, nobody today really wants a kinetic war. The technology that we have built today, I mean, literally, like one little bomb can just annihilate like millions. We really don't want to have it not only kills millions of people, it just simply makes the world uninhabitable. Nobody wants this. And so the other thing, you hit people in their pocketbook, they might become more reasonable. And two, again, there's opportunities to reward people of participating and helping to build a system that is in everybody's best interest. That's also from the story of Hijrah of the Prophet ﷺ from Mecca to Medina, but we'll go into this inshallah another time. I want to open it up to any questions or comments, because I have talked a lot today and my voice is barely holding up. It can be a question, it can just be a thought, a comment, or inshallah we can pray inshallah and make dua for them, and then we can conclude, whichever you like. Tfaddal.
It's kind of like a part of it is a question and the other part of it is kind of comment.
Man, it's like a game show. All right. One half question, one half comment. Okay, tfaddal.
For huge supporters to Israelis, like it's been happening that's for many years that a lot of the people that's been targeted in Palestine is the children, and
It's nothing new. Yeah, the situation is not a new thing. Yeah.
mostly all the children's, they go over to prisons for 20, 30 years plus, whatever. And it's funny that there are a lot of supporters to that. Some of it is maybe, I guess, because of the huge market of few businesses, that few people only like control that. I guess that's the economy, I can say. But the other part is that, like, there are 6 billion people are also, they are the market.
Mm-hmm.
No 6-7 billion people exist. There are no 1 billion people that control the world. I can say 1 billion, but it's like at least like 500, 600 people.
Right.
But it's only like in the Holy Land. Like it's always in Palestine, Jerusalem, and this kind of side. Beside that, there are a little bit of killing all over the world, but mainly it's right now it's all getting transferred, more targets, eyes, news, all that in Gaza. And I believe it's just Gaza. I don't hear Jordan, I don't hear Lebanon, I don't hear Egypt. We don't hear. It's their support with food, support with I don't know what else, but mainly food. Maybe they can get that from the ocean, from the sea, Allah,
Well, I think it's pretty hard for them to do anything by themselves. When somebody's dropping bombs on you, it's pretty hard to do any kind of, subsistence living. Yeah.
Yeah, it's weird. Like there's no deal, no peace going on. That's it's gonna be like 90 days so far, and it's been happening every year. But like my question is gone actually with what I wanted to say. I don't know what
That's okay.
I guess this is what's happening right now, right? Am I wrong? Please correct.
No, no. I mean,
Something like I didn't know, and
there,
I'm not
there.
following.
You know, I think we have to put in our minds that this is not going to go away anytime soon. You know, of course, qadr Allah, but it appears that it's not going to go anyway anytime soon. And that's why I mean it's important that we don't think of dua. We don't think of Allah as like Santa Claus or like an ATM. That when we make dua and that we are emotionally invested in praying for our brothers and sisters in Palestine, fi Gaza, right? That this is something we ourselves have to be invested in this for the long term. It's not going to be a simple. And as they're losing the media war, because more and more, every time they come out and they say something like, "Oh, they chopped off a bunch of heads of babies." Well, okay, that wasn't exactly true, but they raped a bunch of women. Well, actually, we couldn't, we found that the report actually wasn't reliable. Well, so every time they're losing slowly the media war. That's why now they're like, oh, if we can't win the war, that the next step, well, let's drag Lebanon into the war. Let's see if we can drag Iran into the war. Right? They're hoping that they can just kind of keep it's like an octopus, just keep sending out the tentacles to wrap it around to complicate the problem more because they know now everything that they have said, the babies in the oven and the women, it's all, even the New York Times put out this ridiculous report now that's almost had to retract because it's like all the people that they said that they spoke to turned out not to be true. And the organization that was leading that investigation supposedly of, and I don't even like to use that word. I always say, the Harakat al-Muqawat al-Islamiyya. I don't like to say Hamas. I like to say the real world, which is Harakat al-Muqawat al-Islamiyya. It's right, the movement to empower, Islam amongst the Palestinians. That's what, Hamas is. That they say, oh, when they did that, but then that group themselves have been under investigation in Israel for a bunch of things that were all completely fabricated and whatnot. So their whole hope of, and of course you have people that would just slavishly, you have this particular group of Christian Zionists that are completely like hypnotically mesmerized by them, that will support them, no matter what. And as long as they have, Rupert Murdoch and Fox News and mainstream media, they can kind of appear to be. But trust me, most people, and again, globally, all have chosen to side with the Palestinians. People have seen way too many images of babies' bodies in parts that people just can't hang with it anymore. And they're like, I don't care whatever it is you said about that. And also, it's not about Hamas. Hamas has been around since like 84, 87. Like, as you said, this goes back, at least to 48. So this goes back way before, that's why they like to keep saying Hamas, Hamas, Hamas. This has nothing to do with Hamas. This has everything to do of them coming and taking some stuff that never belonged to them and then murdering people when they fought back in self-defense.
You say Hamas, it's like the army of these people, right?
I mean, when people, I'll be honest, when people, I've had it put to me, do you condemn Hamas? I said, I support anybody that will liberate the Palestinians. I said, if you prove to me conclusively something that Hamas did that was wrong, then I will condemn the thing that they did wrong, but I will not condemn them just entirely. No, they have a right, even by their own laws, by international law. Palestinians have a right to armed self-defense and conflict for their own sovereignty. Again, Muslims are going to have to get comfortable. I get maybe not everybody. Alhamdulillah, I'm in a position, at middle ground. There's no board, so I don't really have to appease anybody. So I'm able to speak in a way. The most that they can do is that they can threaten me personally, right? They threaten me, they threaten my daughter, but who cares? Whatever, right? But at least we have to support somebody in the community that has the ability to speak with a rigid backbone to throw this stuff back in their face and be able to speak the truth. Now, again, maybe you can't at your job. Well, fine. Well, then you need to. That's why we need we need imams, we need leaders of people that cannot be either intimidated or bought off, that can speak the truth. So when that was put to me, and I'm going to go to this interfaith thing on Sunday, right? And I'm sure somebody there is going to ask me, "Do you condemn Hamas?" No, I support. I condemn anybody in the face of over 10,000 children being eviscerated has the audacity to ask me if I condemn a political movement. I condemn you. If you ask me, do I condemn Hamas? I condemn you for asking me that dumb question. And so we have to have people that have the capacity to be able to speak like this. Otherwise, we're gonna we're gonna really have a hard time going about this. So again, this is why we have to, ziyarat al-ittihad bin al-Muslimin. We have to have an increase in unity between the Muslims. Not everybody has the ability to speak like that, but somebody in our community must have that protection of where you can't come after me, you can't come after my job, you can't, right? Somebody in our community has to be in that position to speak like that. I mean.
It's like, may Allah, inshallah.
وفقنا والفلسطينيين right على القوم الظالمين. May Allah Ta'ala give the Palestinians, may Allah make them successful. وانصرهم على القوم الكافرين وانصرهم على القوم الظالمين. This is the dua of the Quran. May Allah Ta'ala indeed give them a victory over that. There are a number of dua that some of the ulama have put together that we can make, inshallah. Allahumma istur awratihim, awrat Ahl Palestine. May Allah Ta'ala, we ask Allah to cover and to protect them. Wa rawatihim. May Allah Ta'ala overlook any of their faults. Wa hifadhum. May Allah Ta'ala preserve them. من بين أيديهم ومن خلفهم ومن أيمانهم وعن شمالهم. May Allah Ta'ala protect them from in front of them, to the left, to the right, and behind them, above them, and below them. وانصرهم على القوم الظالمين. May Allah Ta'ala indeed aid and assist them against those that would oppress them. اللهم منزل الكتاب سريع الحساب مجزي الحساب وهازم الأحزاب أهزمهم وزلزلهم وانصر عليهم على القوم الظالمين. O Allah, the one who has sent the book, who is swift in taking to account, the one who moves the clouds and who has defeated the Ahzab, who has defeated people. Oh Allah, may you defeat them and may you shake them and may you aid and assist them over those that would oppress them. وصلوات الله تعالى على النبي الكريم وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين والحمد لله رب العالمين. آمين. وياك.
It's not related, but I just learned that my grandmother has died.
Oh, Allah yarhamha. What was your grandmother's name? زهية قبلان. So نسأل الله أن نجعل زهية قبلان من الصالحين وأسكنها عند الأبرار في جنة النعيم. We ask Allah to bless your grandmother. May He make her amongst the Salihin al-Muttaqin in Jannah. May He situate her in the highest levels of paradise في جنة النعيم وأسكنها عند الأبرار إن شاء الله يا رب العالمين. May Allah Ta'ala bless her and forgive her of any shortcomings that she had in this life. May Allah Ta'ala have mercy upon you and your family in this time of grief. Allah yarhamha wa yarhamukum ajma'in. Ameen. And last, I want to make dua again for our Imam that was murdered in New Jersey, Imam Hassan Sharif, who was murdered just a couple days ago in New Jersey. Again, may Allah Ta'ala have mercy upon him, and may Allah Ta'ala, inshallah, adhu min al-mujtahideen. May Allah Ta'ala make him from the shuhada ala al-yawm al-qiyamah. May Allah Ta'ala make him from the martyrs on the day of judgment. Wa arham ahlahu, inshallah. May Allah Ta'ala have mercy upon his family. Wansurhum, inshallah. May Allah Ta'ala aid them in this time of difficulty. Ameen. Jazakumullahu khairan, inshallah. So I thought we could just pray a few raka'ah before we go and conclude with that, inshallah. Inshallah. Nusalli al-witr. Yes, sir.
My question.
Yeah, go ahead.
This interfaith gathering that you're talking about on Sunday.
Yes, in Riverside, yes.
In Riverside. I'm a little curious. I was thinking that to myself. I would want to know more or like to know more about the Christians as far as who is in support or who are the Zionists and who are the not the Zionists. I'm curious about
Yeah, me too, you know.
the reason why is because I have a Zionist Christian family member. And he made like a social media post. Let's support the IDF. Let's give them, what they need. And I called him. I was asking him, long story short, are you out of your mind or what are you talking about, right? Why are you asking me to help the IDF? I wanted to know why, right? So before I berated him, I asked him why, and he was giving me some, funny reasons for support. And then of course I gave him my side of the story, but I was trying to find out from him, who's teaching you this stuff? You're a family member of mine. I didn't learn.
Well, I think, some people are genuinely ignorant. Like when this thing started, even my own father, may Allah guide him. And I love my father very dearly. When the thing started in October, my dad said to me on the phone, he said, well, they should just bomb the place, just bomb it entirely, and so that there's no more conflict. I said, Dad, why did you say that? I had to really restrain myself because, well, bil walidaini ihsan, that you had to be excellent to your parents. But my father said this, and I was very upset. I said, Dad, where did you get this terrible idea from? Why would you say something like this? Well, I mean, they've always been fighting. No, that's not true. People just don't. I said, Dad, people just don't fight. People fight for a reason. Use your head, man, right? You sit in that chair all day long, staring at CNN, MSNBC, like you're losing your intelligence. People fight for a reason. But one, nobody's been fighting for forever. That's ridiculous. And two, to make that kind of claim, like you have to have some proof to back that up. Where's the proof that they've been fighting for forever? No. Now they started fighting at a certain point. You should ask yourself, why are they fighting? But of course, it's so deeply rooted in the psychology of Westerners. And I mean all Westerners, white, black, whatever. It's so deeply rooted in the DNA of our psychology that those people from that part of the world are just inherently savage. Right? It's so deeply ingrained in our mythology as Americans and Westerners that of course, they've been doing this for forever. There's no other plausible explanation for why they would be doing so. So, I really feel like,
Who are these people you're meeting?
Yeah, I don't know who they are, but me, like personally, I don't really do interfaith as a practice. I personally don't care for it. I distrust it. I don't like it. I find it to be very disingenuous. When I first moved here, I think I went to one interfaith meeting for the Upland Interfaith Council, and this woman got up and she said, well, as people who all believe in the same thing, essentially, I was like, lady, I don't believe in anything that you people believe in. All due respect, but I don't believe in what you believe in. I said, you're an Episcopalian. He's a Reformed Jew. This dude here is a Buddhist, which is basically a hop, skip, and a jump from a kind of atheist. Like he doesn't even believe in God. I definitely don't believe in what you believe. And you want me to come and participate in this for what reason? Well, it's so that we can know when I said, lady, I can go to Wikipedia. I can find out everything I need to know about Episcopalians, about Buddhists, about Hindus. Like I can do my own due diligence to find out generally what you believe. And you can do the same thing about Islam. Now, if you want to go feed some poor people, okay, fine. we'll get to. I don't have no problem working cooperatively in some arenas, but to come together as I said the only people I do interfaith with are other Muslims. That's the only people. When I said when I go to the masjid and I pray with other Muslims, that's interfaith. It's a faith in between me and other people that have the same belief. So I said, even the name. Some of you probably heard me have this rant before, right? But even the name I find very, very deceptive and very problematic. And I've seen some Muslims after having participated in interfaith, particularly a certain type of Muslim that is thirsty for a certain type of affirmation from the dominant social group. Yes, I'm saying brown Muslims looking for affirmation from white people, right? Just going to be honest about it. That they've become confused about their own religion to the point they say, "Oh, we all believe in a higher power." We don't believe Allah is a power. We believe in la hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. But we don't believe that Allah huwa al-quwwa. We don't believe Allah is power. Allah is al-aziz, right? Just like we don't believe Allah is love. We believe Allah is al-wadud, right? We don't believe God is love. We believe God is loving. This is why we have aqa'id, right? This is why we have a creed. And so to answer your question, I have no idea, but under the set of circumstances, I'm going to go for two reasons. One, I'm genuinely curious to see, are these people trying to have an action plan to do something? I mean, if they're genuinely want to emotionally support people for power, okay, alhamdulillah, that's all wonderful. I want to see if that's the genuine case. Or is this a kind of attempt to subvert Muslims from speaking out against this under the idea of like, oh, we love you Muslims if you just hush, hush. I don't know what it's going to be. And two, or I guess three, I don't trust a lot of the other Muslims out there in the interfaith circle, so I'm going to kind of come like Uncle Ruckus. I'm going to kind of have to disrupt a little bit. I just, I really, not that I'm the answer to everything, but I've been very distrustful of the process. And so this is a rare moment of me kind of asserting myself as Imam. Normally, I don't really get into titles and all that. I just do my little thing. I teach Islam. I go home. But in this one rare moment, I'm going to kind of assert myself and be like, look, no. What's going on here? So we'll see. I'll give you the report on Monday.
I just, even personally, I'm taken aback by the deep ignorance, this ocean, dark, deep ignorance that people do.
Again, but I think we have to admit though.
It didn't make. What are you talking about? We already support them by paying taxes.
No, but
this individual is older that I was speaking to, this family member.
Yeah.
But I'm just thinking, if I have one, how many of them they're everywhere?
Yes.
Mexican, in my family, the Mexican family. So I'm like, hell, we weren't raised on that. He's not a Catholic though. He's he's I don't even know, Protestant, whatever Protestant denomination, whatever.
Yeah.
30,000, which you pick one. He's one of those. Episcopalian, whatever.
Sure. Yeah. No. I don't be. Again, this is something that is deeply rooted in the Western mythology. Yeah. And also, they have done a fabulous job. And again, we have to, as Allah says, "Laysu sawa." They're all the same, right? I mean, there are many Jews that are completely against not only just Israel, but particularly against Zionism, right? But the Zionists have done a particularly crafty job of portraying themselves as victimized. And they've been masterful at playing this little violin, of which apparently, particularly a great many Christians are just, I don't know. It's kind of like me. Like if you put on some John Coltrane, to the best of my ability, I'm going to start to kind of react to that music, even though I remember one of my teachers, he's originally from Philly. He said I had gone out to eat with a group of visiting scholars from Saudi Arabia. And so I'm sitting with this around, and we're in this restaurant, and this group of scholars from Saudi Arabia, and here I am, like included in the group as I'm the only African American there. And so it's like this kind of privilege. We're all talking about these high level things about Islam. And he said, there was a live band and they started playing some James Brown. And he said, man, to like the best of my ability, my leg just started, and he's like, I had to go into the bathroom and like just like splash cold water on my face. Cause he said, man, when it comes to James Brown, I can't help myself. He said, I was about to embarrass myself in front of all these big scholars, right? So, they're just very adept at playing this kind of harp or violin that just, whatever, they just react to like a Pied Piper.
Well, and I would add that when I was actually saying these certain things to him, I was playing softball with him, but he was giving these very low level, low IQ answers.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Responses that were very, it was almost ridiculous. So I began to think this is a cultural deep.
People have been programmed.
30, 40 years.
Yes.
And news and Walter Cronkite and all this kind of going back before I was even born.
Oh, dude, forget about that. Go back. I mean, I remember as a kid growing up, and I'm not in any way denying that that's a horrible thing. But I remember as a kid, like I'm talking about in first, second grade, reading about Anne Frank. For those who are not familiar, Anne Frank, of course, was like a young, I think she was originally from Germany, Jewish girl that had to hide in the basement, and eventually they came in the pit, right? And so we grew up with this great emotional sensibility about the Jews and the Holocaust, of which we did not have about the millions of indigenous so-called Native Americans that were absolutely wiped off the face of the earth. We had no emotional sensibilities about these people whatsoever, as if it was an act of God, a natural disaster. It was just, we never, ever were literally brainwashed. And when I say that, I'm not saying it's not tragic what happened to Anne Frank, but I mean, think about it in school. We never learned, I didn't even learn about Wounded Knee until I was in college. The absolute massacre of the so-called Native Americans, or what Leopold did in the Congo, of which he murdered like what, 15, 20 million Africans, amputating their limbs. And when you go right now, and they'll list like, the most evil people in history, Hitler's like number one, even though Mao killed way more people than him. Stalin killed way more people than him. And Leopold killed way more people than all of them. Leopold's not even on the list. Hitler is the number one evil person in all of history. Even to them as a people, to the so-called Jews, he is more evil than Fir'aun. I'm saying, like, he's viewed as even more. And I would even contend that a great many people, even Christians, because they don't know their book at all. Because which book is it? Right? They don't know their book. When you mention Pharaoh, this is why you get like these like Hotep black Christians that do this like mixing of like Egyptology and Christianity, and they like there's a dude that plays for the Detroit Lions. His name is Amon-Ra St. Brown. Like, I read his bio. Right, Amun-Ra, which is named after like some moon god or whatever or the sun god in Egyptian mythology. But then his last name is St. Brown. So he's his Christian last name and Egyptian Mushrikeen first name. And when I read his bio, his dad was like all into this like Hotep, New Agey, black spirituality. So he wanted to name his kid. I'm like, wait a minute, you are a Christian. You believe in God, and you believe in Christ as the Son of God. But you named your kid after an Egyptian god? How does that work? Right? I mean, I know we're going way off, topic here. But I think the reason why you have to understand there has been an agenda to program people to have certain sympathies and to not have other sympathies. Yes.
And I think adding on to that, funnily enough, I was a seventh grader in 2014, and
That hurt.
I guess
Wow. Seventh grader in 2014. Man, that hurt. I gotta stretch. All right, go ahead.
well, funnily enough, within the curriculum that we were taught about history, Battle of Hastings, and kind of the start of humanity. Right. The golden age of Islam, I remember being taught over the course of a week as such a small,
Yep.
and obviously being Muslim now and knowing that this has such a massive implication to the post-Renaissance world as we know in Western Europe, to the Americas, to just the Western world, and it just being completely brushed over. But to where, at least I don't know about other states, but in California, they can say, we did our part. We taught this small.
Yes.
But as a seventh grader, when
Yeah.
I don't care, and if I wasn't Muslim, I would have just forgotten about it anyway.
Right. Yeah.
So like you said, there is kind of a cognitive dissonance, and
I mean, even in the way that we perceive the world, right? I mentioned before about, astronauts and looking about, but if you think about it, if you go right now and you pull up any map of the world, the most common, I think, is like the Decatur, right? The particular projection, because of course a map is a square or a rectangle, right? But the Earth is, again, my apologies to the flat earthers, the Earth is round, right? At least roughly round, right? It's definitely not flat. And so an only way that you can put a round object that is three-dimensional and depict it in a one-dimensionality, there has to be some skewing going on, right, to some distortion to make that into a one-dimensional image. Well, they got this great idea. You know what? We got a great way to solve this. We'll make America huge and everything else much smaller. So when you look on a world map, the most common projection that's used, you see America that's right there, massive, and little old South America, and Russia's okay. Actually, it's much the other way around. I mean, it's true. America is a big country, but there are other countries that are bigger and bigger land masses, but it's projected, and that's done intentionally so. That's done intentionally so to put in the minds of people who matters and who doesn't matter. But again, we ask Allah for success. Nasallah at-tawfiq. We ask Allah to, for success, and we ask Him to indeed help our brothers and sisters in Palestine. May He have mercy upon them. And inshallah, وَلِأَمْوَاتِهِمْ مِنْ أَوْلَادِهِمْ, from those of those that are deceased, especially their children. Inshallah, they are going to be Ashab al-Jannah. Inshallah, Ashab al-Yamin fi Jannat al-Na'im. May Allah Ta'ala make them from amongst the highest inhabitants of paradise. Ameen. Wa jazakum Allahu khairan. Assalamu alaikum. All right. I think my voice is done.